Good afternoon. So lovely to see you all. Oh, look at those cameras turning on. I love when the cameras turn on. Makes me feel so much less alone. Wilson too. Wilson likes it too. Wilson likes to see your smiley little faces. All of them, up, down, in, out. All right. Can you believe it was 8 months ago that Wilson arrived? 8 months. Wow. Okay, so we are here today for a very specific purpose, and I appreciate you joining me. I hope this ends up being as helpful as possible. And ultimately the idea of today is kind of twofold. I wanted to show you. Let me give you a quick version of why we're having this conversation today. Right? I think I mentioned it once. I'm going to mention it just real quickly to start our time together. I have had conversations with a bunch of different sellers in the last couple of weeks. Right? Ever since the summer was kind of over, anybody who didn't sell over the summer, like in the big wave of whatever, was scratching their head as to why, and a lot of that ended up with conversations with me, which again, I'm happy to do whenever and however you guys need me to do it. And what I found over and over again, sometimes I would have conversations with you on the call, and sometimes I would be set up with the client kind of offline, so just me and the client. And in the last couple of weeks, again, probably September, October, even maybe mid-September into October, the conversations that I've had, a number of them had a very, it was a common theme, and it was a concerning theme for me. And the common theme was, when I would have this conversation with the seller, the first thing the seller would say is, well, thank you very much. That was very helpful. I'm curious, why have I not heard any of this information before? And when I heard it once, I thought, whatever. When I heard it twice, I thought, a little less whatever. When I heard it a third and a fourth and a fifth time, I thought, oh man, that like somewhere along the lines, we have to all kind of come back together and recognize that there are things that sellers are looking for that we're not always delivering, right? And so what I thought would be helpful, again, so this is not me saying I clearly do this better than you, because I don't believe that to be true at all. You're the ones who are in the field every day, not me. However, I wanted to show you the stats that I pull and then how I communicate those stats to the seller, just from a point of objectivity, to say, I personally have received really good feedback on this delivery system. And if it's helpful to you to either adopt or tweak your own delivery system after seeing what I'm doing with the sellers, then great. If you think that this whole thing that I do today doesn't bring you any further or get you any other results, again, your business, you get to make those choices. So please don't hear this from the perspective of this is Rick's way, so it must be the right way. Therefore, the way I think to do it or the way I have been doing it is the wrong way. Not the point. I've just been getting feedback from a lot of your sellers that the way I've been delivering this information and what information I've been using to create that delivery is desired by the sellers, and has been very helpful in helping them make decisions. And so that's what ultimately we're here to discuss. Any questions or comments about that? And so here's the other thing that I'll mention. Objective versus subjective. You guys have heard me talk about that a million times, right? Objective versus subjective. One of the things that I think you will agree with me on is that if there is anything that I do consistently, it is come at these things very objectively. It's about the numbers that we see and the delivery of those numbers, and about asking good questions about those numbers instead of having opinions about them, right? So the more objective you can be and just kind of push data, and then ask some questions around it, I think you'll find the simpler it is to do. Somebody said to me one day last week, you asked a question that I would have been afraid to ask, right? And I frankly, I can't remember exactly what the question was. It was something about, well, I think I asked because the seller threatened to take the house off the market, right? And you know, what I heard, what subjectively, when one says that, right? So let's think about this. If it's your listing and you're expecting a paycheck from that listing and someone threatens you by taking it off the market, they're kind of threatening your income, right? And they do that for a reason. They do that because they think that by threatening to take it off the market, suddenly your ideas about what the market is saying, like suddenly the numbers that you're discussing are going to magically change because they've now threatened you with a reduction in income. And so when she asked me that, you know, well, I think I may just have to take it off the market. I asked a simple question and I said, well, let me ask you this. Does taking it off the market help you accomplish your real estate goals? I'm modeling the answer I got. And she finally said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, the best way I know how not to sell a house is to not have it be on the market. So if your decision is to remove it from the market, I completely support that. I'm just curious, does it really accomplish your goals? And she said, well, I'm not sure. And I said, well, let's do this. What are your goals? Well, I have to get out from under this house. It's bankrupting me. I already moved. I live in a different state. I need to get out from under this house. Got it. And so talk to me about how removing it from the market accomplishes you getting out from under it. Well, it doesn't. Okay, great. So I'm going to assume that that was said out of emotion. And one of the things I want to be certain that I help you do today is stay really grounded in making good, objective business decisions. Would that be okay for our conversation? Guess what? After I set that tone with her, she didn't go down the why aren't you doing enough? What else can, she didn't go down that whole road of let's blame the real estate agent. She stayed focused on the data, right? So sometimes I find that one of the techniques that, and so again, the agent was on the line and said to me afterwards, I wouldn't have asked that question. I would have been afraid to ask that question. I think I would have gone to trying to convince her not to do that. And I said, of course, it doesn't make you a bad real estate agent. It makes you human. It makes you like so many others who are going to take that approach instead of pulling back. Remember, our job is to support their decisions, good ones, bad ones, in between. So I was certain to have a conversation that said, if that's your choice, I support it. I'm just curious, how does it support your goals? So let's move on from there for a second. I want to do one thing and then go. I have a conversation that I want to read to you. It's a conversation that I documented after a conversation I had with a seller back in mid-August, right? And so I want to read this to you because this is when things started to really solidify for me that as a structure, this kind of thing works really well. You know what, maybe I'll do that first. Maybe I'll read this first to you so that you have an understanding of what I'm talking about. Then we'll dive in. I want to show you very specifically how we get some of those stats that I'm talking about in this conversation, because some of them are maybe newer to your world than not. Right? It's not just month supply of inventory. We kind of dove a little deeper. I'll give you a background on this person. This was somebody who was under agreement since June and was struggling having the buyer close, right? And the question that was asked of me is, can you assess my situation and help me determine whether or not I should dump these buyers and put the house back on the market? That's the background of this conversation, right? So I'm going to read this to you. It's not short, right? Those of you who know me know that you shouldn't expect short, because you should expect comprehensive. And I wanted to make every point as crystal clear as possible. So let me read this through. Take some notes and write down what you hear what the things you hear that you do, the things you hear that you don't do, things that might be a little bit new, some ahas, ways that things are said, and then we'll go through and we'll outline each of the stats specifically, including maybe jumping onto the MLS and showing you exactly how to pull them. Okay. Mr. Seller, I have taken a look at the current, recent past, and expected future of the Bethel market, especially for single-family properties, in an attempt to offer an overview of what we have seen and perhaps what we can expect. In no particular order, some overall comments. Number one, Bethel inventory remains extremely low. For single-family housing, there are less than 2 months supply of inventory on the market. Less if you remove some of the new construction, which is unable to be purchased and lived in a 60-day time period. That reference is an extreme seller's market. Two, that same version of a seller's market has been in Bethel for the last 3 months or so, since about the time of our first phase of reopening. Prior to that, we were in a seller's market, just not quite as extreme, due to housing coming off the market during the shutdown, a fact I mention simply because it is notable. Same end result, lack of housing and steady demand, however, foundationally slightly different reasoning for that seller's market condition. The fact that there are very few homes on the market in Bethel right now works to your advantage. If you were to come back on the market, you could likely come back at a higher price point. Exactly what kind of a higher price point is difficult to say. Prices in general are up 2.5% year over year, and yet have tracked only about a percentage point higher over the last 3 months. We will know better at the end of August as more properties close from June and July contracts, exactly what the market is telling us about potential price increases for your property. However, as of today, higher is likely, just not a whole lot higher. Number four, the biggest trend that I see when looking at what is currently on the market over $400,000 is that sellers are clearly attempting to overshoot the market. This is for all the crazed New Yorkers who have tons of money, or so they think, and many of them are not realizing their expectations of multiple offers in the first week, with offers way over asking. So they are reducing prices to attract eyeballs. We are seeing the frenzy more in lower Fairfield County and more in lower price ranges throughout the rest of the county than we are in the over 400 world in Bethel. Number five, the other issue I am seeing in general is even when sellers are successful in obtaining offers in a higher than expected range, appraisals can be an issue. We do not have the closed inventory to support massive price increases yet. So the appraisers are forced to use current closed inventory, which again only reflects about a 2.5% increase over last year. So now you have sellers accepting higher offers who are then forced to renegotiate once the appraisal comes in short or risk losing the buyer. Number six, you don't have a pool. The frenzied buyer, for all intents and purposes, is looking for a pool. And more times than not, they are looking for a pool already in place, not just the pool site you mentioned earlier. This seems to be a requirement for New York buyers coming up to the country. Must have that pool. And I am seeing that homes which do not offer the pool are sitting longer, not going to multiple offers as quickly, and are not caught up in the surge quite as often. That is not to say that all buyers require a pool, just a trend with the current round of New York buyers you had mentioned. Number seven, the further north and the further east one goes in Fairfield County, the less of an anything goes type market exists. Shorter inventory still exists because many sellers are still freaked out about having strangers wander through their homes. However, in my offices, which represent nearly 500 agents in Upper and Lower Fairfield County, we have a huge backlog of sellers who are unwilling to jump into the market right now due to health concerns. That puts a slightly different spin on the shortage of inventory for me. It's not all about the thousands of buyers that people think have descended upon Fairfield County. Don't get me wrong, we definitely have more demand than we have seen in a long time. However, that alone is not what is driving the market at present. Number eight, I am uncertain of your carrying costs for this property. I do see a tax bill of about $1,000 a month. I would assume that you have all these costs spelled out. I bring it up for the what if scenario of placing the property back on the market and then not attracting a buyer quickly. Say it takes 30 to 60 days to attract that buyer. That typically means a closing period of another 45 to 75 days past that. So minimally, you are looking at postponing a closing period for 90 to 120 days, further than if you were to stick with these current buyers. You would need to be certain to obtain an offer higher than the one you have right now, and it would have to be higher than what it costs you to carry the house for those 4 months in order just to break even. And then I went on to say a couple of other things that he had asked me about that have nothing to do with the market. So talk to me a little bit about what you heard. Again, it's not like publishable. Like I said, I am no better or worse or smarter or not than you. I've just found that delivering things in such a way has been very attractive to the sellers I've been talking to, and their concern has been they haven't heard a lot of the things that I was talking about. So unmute and tell me what it is you heard. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you thought was redundant or unnecessary in terms of delivery and in terms of content, and then we'll dive into the stats part of it.
I like the fact that you told the seller that even though there is a year-over-year 2.5% increase, it's not necessarily going to be realized because it's not there now. We don't have the stats to show that. And I also like the fact that obviously the person brought up a pool and they don't have one. And you're right, a lot of people coming from New York are definitely looking for a pool, and not just a pool site, because putting in a pool is a costly endeavor. So that even adds more to the purchase price or whatever they would have to pay. So I think that person needs to be realistic to know that they probably should either stay on the market at the price they have or maybe reduce it.
Yeah, agreed, right? So one of the things Alice mentioned, and we're gonna look at this in the MLS in a minute, right? Year over year pricing is great. However, you have to make sure that you're also looking at current pricing trends. So that means what did this look like 30 days ago, 60 days ago, 90 days ago, maybe even 120 days ago? And I'll show you how to do that, right? Some of those more current trends are some of the things that I think are being left out of these conversations with sellers that they find really important and helpful, right? You can say 2.5% year over year. If you noticed, it was only 1% in the last 90 days when I ran these numbers. Well, that's very different, right? You're talking about $4,000 versus $12,000, right? What else?
I like that you gave a nice narrative thread and put it into context. And I also liked with the pricing, but I think if I got it correctly, you're saying that don't overprice it because people are going to come in and they're expecting to pay more. So by going too high initially, you might price yourself out or make it prohibit. I think that's the point you were making.
Yeah, great points, Alicia. And one of the points I was definitely looking to make was my goal was to have this person stick with the offer he already had. There really was no reason for him to dump these folks. He had to just work with getting them closed, right? And so he was all emotional about these buyers are terrible. There's got to be better buyers out there. And because there's better buyers out there, I'll also make tons more money because I said yes to somebody before the prices went crazy, right? And some of that was true. And I conceded to where he could make perhaps a little bit more money. And yet on the other side of that same coin, we were battling this notion that there was a stampede out of New York for exactly the house that he was offering. And we had to make sure he understood that's not really true. Are there more buyers? Certainly. Will they come and rush to your house? Probably less so, right? And so one of the things, Silva, give me half a second. One of the things I want you to remember is the whole idea of objectivity, right? Sometimes helping people recognize that the things they think are true are really less true than they think. That comes from you being objective and promoting facts, like facts first. Let's go back to the facts. You can think whatever you'd like. The facts say something a little bit different. Now, can you prove that there are fewer New York buyers up in Bethel than there are in Stamford? Maybe not. However, you do have that idea to utilize. It says, in my experience in the last few months, this is what we're seeing, right? And I find that some of you are reluctant to utilize the phrase, in my experience, or would it surprise you to know that this is what we're seeing? Have a bit of an interpretation to some of this data that helps people interpret it the way they need to. That doesn't mean do their work for them and have an opinion. It means help them interpret it. Go ahead, Silva.
This is exactly what I wanted to say. I specifically liked how you put it. Sellers are attempting to overshoot the market. So you're taking the pressure off of them. You're not telling them that they're doing it. You're just saying it that this is out of your experience, what you have noticed, and you're expecting for them to actually realize that you're addressing them.
Yeah, that's a
So
really
this is
great
something
catch.
I really like.
Right? A
Yeah.
really great catch, because again, it's written that way very purposefully. Speaking about when you want to communicate something to a seller and that seller is behaving in exactly that way, when you point the finger and say you're doing it, well, that pushes them into a defensive position. It's contentious, right? It's almost you being defensive, which makes them be defensive. So instead, one technique you can use is to broaden that to say, we've noticed over the past 90 days that sellers are behaving in this manner. And then they get to decide whether or not they fit into that or they don't fit into it, right? But you're not pointing a finger, so it doesn't have to be contentious. Instead, it stays very objective with you having a conversation from the position of partnership. Great catch, Silva. Anything else?
I liked how, Rick, you quantified the carrying costs, because that can be a number that's just money thrown away.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And so one of the things to remember in these situations is that you're always dealing with a net, right? So when I was looking at it, I thought, all right, this guy's probably, even if he comes back on the market, he's rolling the dice. It could take him another 3 to 4 months. Again, he didn't live here anymore. He wasn't living in the house. So now it's just extra carrying costs. Have you done the math? And that one piece was one of the things that he was so appreciative of, because he hadn't thought of it and it hadn't been brought to his attention before. Here he is thinking, I have no other choice but to just keep carrying this house. Well, you do have a choice. Financially, you could just decide to sell to these people instead of determining that you're losing money by selling to the people that you've already said yes to, because they're looking to close in like 2 weeks. We just had to figure out getting them there.
Yeah. And if I may add something.
Of course.
First of all, Kathleen, you stole my line. Haha. I was just about to say the same. And then I wrote down your entry line today for this meeting when you said that the best way you know how to not sell a house is not to have it on the market. I think that this is brilliant, and I'm going to write it all over the place. This is brilliant.
And it's true, right? I literally had to say that to somebody this morning again. Someone who asked me yesterday about, what about the option of taking the house off the market? Okay, a different person, by the way, right? And so again, when you recognize that sometimes those things are said, let me take this small moment to say this about sellers. I think all sellers are way smarter than we sometimes give them credit for. And so my goal in talking to a seller is to help them recognize just how much they know. And that may be different than the approach that some people are using, right? Because again, we like to feel good about the help we're offering and the information we're offering. I would rather come at it from the perspective of, I'm just the guy who's putting it on the table. Most of this you already knew. We're just going to create a conversation around it so that you can utilize. Guys, what's the difference between knowledge and wisdom? I've mentioned this a couple of times in the last couple of weeks.
One is based on current fact and data. Wisdom is based on past experience.
Right? So knowledge is the stuff that we're learning every day, right? So when you sit down with a seller and you bring new data to the table, well, they're learning new things. That's them acquiring knowledge. Wisdom is how one chooses to utilize the knowledge one has accumulated, right? It's just a different way of saying exactly what Silva said. And so when you make the goal all about helping them step into their wisdom by providing a little bit of knowledge and then encouraging them to use the smarts they already have, use that wisdom to make good decisions, I find it to be almost every single time that people are less emotional. Give me half a second more, Silva. If there's one thing I have noticed across the board is that every single seller that I have spoken with ever in my broker career, you know what, that's a lie, because there have been probably one or two that were raving crazy banshee people. But for the most part, when you guys come to me and say, this person is off their rocker, they're angry, they're upset, they're yelling, they're treating me badly and whatnot, I get on the phone with them and that doesn't show up. And what that tells me is, you know, some people on this call would say, there's a term for that, Rick. It's called, you know, like cold-hearted, you know, automaton. I'm certain that's not it. And yet I have spent my career getting better and better and better about not injecting emotion into these conversations, right? And so the more objective and fact-based that you can be, I find it just keeps everybody way calmer, including when they don't agree. Because when people don't agree, then you just get to have the conversation that says, you know what, I completely understand. One of my calls last week was with this person who was bleeding money up here. And she started to get upset, emotionally upset. And I said, you know what, I am so sorry that this has been so difficult for you. I'm curious, what is the one thing? She kept defending her agent, by the way. Defending him up and down. He has done everything possible. I don't know what else to do. And I started with, you know what? I think you do know what to do. What's the one thing that you've been reluctant to utilize as an idea to get your property sold? She knew exactly what I was talking about when I asked that question. She said the price. I said, yeah. I said, and you know what I found? In my experience, nobody likes it when we have to have that conversation. And yet, the other part of my experience says there's only one reason a house doesn't sell. So does it make sense for us to take a look at that objectively? Here's the other thing I can encourage you to do. Help people have these conversations from the perspective of, let's talk about all the options and realities that exist. Knowing full well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm not going to hold you to any of them. However, let's determine in real time, using real data, where you believe the property should be in order to attract a buyer quickly. Regardless of what you say, you may choose to make a different decision and position it differently. You may choose to keep the property where it is, but they're two separate decisions. When I was a team leader, I used to look at recruiting agents the same way. It's two separate decisions. Linda and I are going to have a conversation around why this organization may be a benefit to her, her family, and her business. Once she understands that is a possibility for her, now we have a separate conversation that's about her making the decision to actually take that step. But they're two different conversations. First, she has to understand the foundation of why it might make sense to say yes. Then she actually has to decide to say yes. And oftentimes we squish them into one conversation. I think we do that with sellers as well, right? We have to help them see exactly what they want and how to get it. And then as a separate decision, decide if they're willing to do that. They're not the same conversation. One happens first, then the second one happens. It compartmentalizes things for sellers, and it helps you stay objective because you're not concerned about the, oh my goodness, we're getting down to the nitty gritty and they're going to get upset. Sorry, Silva, tell me.
Okay, so two things. Thank you, Rick. First, Marcel has a question in the chat box. I know you're not seeing your chat box.
Oh, let's see.
Marcel?
Did you speak with the seller or all the conversation was through emails? So great question, Marcel. Any and all of these conversations should be in person. Don't hide behind email. I wrote this out after I had a really great phone conversation. It was not a Zoom call, but it was a phone-to-phone conversation with that particular person. And after it was received so well, I went back and wrote it down so that I had it to use in the future as a structure. But I encourage you, do not send emails, because even if you're not hiding behind an email, the seller feels like you're hiding behind an email. The seller deserves your voice and your face, if at all possible. The seller deserves, and frankly, I don't think you're as effective via email because you can't answer questions via email in real time. You can't see their face. You can't hear how they're feeling in their voice. So it's less effective via email, if that answers the question. Thank you, Silva.
Yeah, you're
Thank you.
welcome. And now I would like to challenge you, because this is coming my way probably in a couple of months, this conversation, which already started with my sellers, who, first of all, they're in no rush, okay, even if they don't ever sell. And the second sentence, though, is that they realize that at this price, the market is rejecting us. And for the sake of this, if you can just trust me that I have used every single sentence under the moon in our conversations in person. And then here is what I heard. When is our contract up? December 31st. Okay. Then I'm going to call Mr. Cash Buyer and I'm going to sell it for 100,000 less than I have listed it right now. End of story.
So two things. First, Silva gave us a clue as to what the objection handler on this is, right? Because the first thing Silva said was, these people have absolutely no motivation to sell their house. Right? They're in no rush. It doesn't matter to them.
Although they're on the other hand saying that they would like to sell, okay? So I'm hearing both from.
Right. So to me, the conversation is not about numbers. Now the conversation is about, look, you have a decision to make. Is it in your best interest to sell this house now? If it's in your best interest to sell this house now, we need to go through a list of things that you think need to be done to get that done. If in fact you choose not to sell this house now, I actually would encourage you to remove the house from the market earlier than December 31st. Because right now, all you're doing is making yourself nuts. Right now, you're fostering resentment in our relationship. And I say that with all due respect, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, right? But my concern is that you think somehow we're letting you down. And we feel like we're letting you down. And in this moment, it may be better for us to agree to disagree on what has to get done to get the job done. And let's just step back from it and remove you from the market. Guys, that's called a takeaway. When you call people on their stuff, oftentimes they come back and say, well, no, that's not really what I meant. Okay, well, let's talk about what you did mean then. Right? Remember, sellers are skilled at the art of deflection. Sellers are skilled at the art of deflection. I'm not sure if they all go to seller school and learn this. I'm not exactly sure how they are so skilled at it, and yet they are, right? They don't even mean to be. You have to see some of that for what it is. It's deflection. It's, I don't want to look at the truth, so therefore I'm going to make it about something else. The other thing that I would encourage, and Silva, I'm going to say, because I have a background with with Silva and understand where your head is at, I think, better than maybe others on the call. If you don't mind, I'm going to use that background to help give you a piece of advice on this.
Yes.
You tend, and it's not just you, which is why I'm using this as an example, I know you do, and many of us tend to want to fix the problem, right? So the second part of Silva's issue is she feels like they're making a massive mistake because they're saying, I'll just take it off and I'll sell it to some cash, investor person or whatever and make tons less. If it were me, instead of convincing them what a bad idea that is, just simply support it. I understand. That is absolutely an option. I'm happy to talk through that option with you financially. If you want to net it out, but I completely support that option. I'm curious, would it make better sense for us to take you off the market today so that you could pursue that option?
Yeah, so I said it halfway. I didn't say the end. The end is brilliant. Thank you for that.
Right. And so all I'm saying is sometimes we have to be a little bit more courageous in saying the hard stuff, because the hard stuff is, well, what if they say yes? Well, now I'm out of listing. Yep. You weren't selling it anyway. So why hang on to it?
May I just say very quickly something?
Sure.
I do believe in the price though, unfortunately.
Yeah, so let's address that, right? Because I've had that a couple of times recently, where the agent comes to me and says, I don't know what else to do. Can you help have a conversation with the seller? I don't know what else to do. And the first thing I ask is, well, when was the last time you reduced the price? And I received that same information. It doesn't need to be reduced. I believe it's in the exact spot it needs to be. Guys, you are believing your own marketing, right? And you have to be really cautious about that. Objectively, I need you to view this way. It's like a light switch. It's on or it's off. There is no in between. If the house sells, it was priced well. If the house doesn't sell, there's a problem with the price. And sometimes we get attached to properties or attached to sellers, and all of a sudden we're making excuses, or we're coming up with, again, we're buying our own marketing. How could the price not be right? It's a beautiful, gorgeous house. It has a lovely pool. All right, well then you buy it for that price. If you're not going to put your money where your mouth is, and the property hasn't sold and it's been more than 14 or 21 days, you have a price issue. And I will tell you that, again, objectively, when I speak to sellers, there is no middle ground. Regardless of what I feel about it, regardless of what they say, there's no middle ground. There's only one reason a house doesn't sell, and that is price. And Mr. and Mrs. Seller, would it surprise you to know that one thing, the positioning of your home in the market, is actually the one thing that's out of the market's control and out of my control as your listing agent. There's only one party that controls the positioning of your property. I'm curious if experience tells us that a property that doesn't sell in 14 to 21 days is being rejected by the market, and there's only one way to address that, and that there's only one party who has control over that decision. What do you think the next part of our conversation should be? Where do you think we should be going here? So with all due respect, who said that? Was it Silva? With all due respect, Silva, the price is wrong. I don't know what property you're talking about. It doesn't matter. The price is wrong. I know they don't think so, and I know you don't think so. However, the most important person in the room, the market, has spoken loud and clear. And I think we ignore the market at our peril. I'm not saying it's easy, right? Some of you, behavioral style plays a role in this. Some of you naturally are more empathetic. Naturally, you're more people, and these conversations are harder for you because you do want to jump in and connect. You do want to help. You do want to help fix the problem. You want to make sure they don't make bad decisions. I'll tell you another script that I've used in the last couple of weeks. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is it okay if I am direct with what I'm about to say? Here's what's fun. Nobody ever says no to that. They say yes. And this person said yes. I said, would it surprise you? Wow, I completely lost my train of thought. Luckily, I'm better at this when I'm on the phone with your sellers. Oh my God, where was I going? What were we just talking about this?
Just repeat what you said, that the market at our panel is the most important piece of the equation, and you just decided to ignore it.
Yeah, it was a version of that, and I can't remember what the example I was going to use. I have to be honest. When I said this one, because it was kind of right on that line, and I thought, well, I'm just going to try it. It was one of those. I think it was the conversation I had with a woman who it was a woman who kept asking me what my role in all of this was. Like, how did my property slip through the cracks? And I said, well, can you describe that for me? And she said, well, my agent has been great. Why didn't you catch this? And I said, that's a fascinating question. Can you explain that to me? What is it that you were expecting I would catch? And she said, well, I'm certain you review all the listings to make sure that anything that hasn't sold has a conversation. Aren't you the safety net? And I said, no, I'm not. She said, you're kidding. And I said, I'm not kidding. Let's get back to the conversation at hand, right? It was clear to me we were off down another deflection point. We're down another bunny trail. I love my agent. Let's make it Rick's fault. No, there is no safety net that exists. Let's talk a bit about what we can do. Right? Is it okay if I'm direct with you? Does it make sense to you that there's really only one way for you to have what you're looking for, which is a sold property? Can you think of what that is? Can we agree to have a calm conversation about the positioning of your property, knowing full well that you get to make the ultimate choice about whether you're willing to do it or not? That's another script that I've used that I have found really helps people open up. Are you willing to have a conversation, like an objective conversation in partnership about the positioning of your property, knowing that you still get to make the ultimate choice about whether you're willing to do it? It helps people, again, remember I said separate those two things out? That helps people accept the numbers and then have to make a decision, but I'm not willing to do that. I understand. If you're unwilling to do that, may I ask what your thoughts are about the next steps forward? Right? Again, I'm continuing to consult. I want to know if you're not willing to look at the price, and we know that the price is the only thing that actually changes the numbers, where are we going to go? So we're down a bunny trail of objection handling, price reductions, right? And that wasn't exactly where we were headed today. And I do want to make sure that I show you the stats because we only have 15 minutes left. Alicia, go ahead and ask your question, and I want to jump on and show you the stats.
So if you're going prepared to get this price reduction and you ask that question and they say, okay, do you come prepared at that meeting with the price you think it should be or the data to support the conversation, just like you do in the original pricing conversation?
Yes, so that's a great question. My answer is I would not pick up the phone or arrive at my seller's house or log into Zoom without doing all the work I'm about to show you first, every single time. Even if you're not having a price reduction conversation, if you're having a phone call with your seller, you need to know this data, because you never know when the conversation is going to veer towards, you know. And by the way, before I let you go, Debbie, I'm curious, right? I'm curious where the you know, where the market's going, or why we don't have more traffic. Right now, all of a sudden, you're like, so in my opinion, running this data for your listings is a constant version of you updating yourself before you're having conversations with sellers.
So what I'm going to add, since you said my name out loud, is I'm running some stats right now. And one of the stats that you can just use blanket is in every town, there are more homes that have sold this year than any year in recent history. And, oh, by the way, at higher prices. And if you have been on the market, you have been experiencing that market and it has rejected you. I am so sorry. What do you want to do now?
Yeah, that's a great point, right? To that, so along the same lines, I'll give you this one as well. This is the version of what Debbie just said that I've been using with sellers is, you know, I'm curious, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, would it surprise you to know that more than 90% of the inventory that my offices have listed since June 1st is either already sold or pending to be sold? Over 90%. I'm curious, what do you think that says about the fact that the market's overlooked your property? Right? Because sometimes they want to wave a hand and say, well, you know, what else are you going to do? Oh, that was it. That was it. That was what I was going to say before when I said, do you mind if I'm direct with you? Because a gentleman said to me a couple of weeks ago, you know, you keep wanting to have a conversation around what the market's doing. I want to know what you're doing. Aren't you in charge there? He said. And I thought, yeah, only in my dreams am I in charge anywhere. However, I understand your point. My title might say I'm in charge, right? Aren't you in charge? What are you going to do? And I said, what are you going to do differently? It was the exact question. And I said, you know, Mr. Seller, I appreciate you asking that question. Would you mind if I'm very direct with you? And he said, well, yes, of course. That's what I expect. Great. I said, my answer to that question is nothing. And I just let it sit. I think he was expecting more. And he said, that's your answer? And I said, well, if you're asking what additional things we're going to do to expose your property to more qualified buyers, that is the entire answer. The answer is nothing. May I explain why the answer is nothing? He said, I absolutely. I said, well, would it surprise you to know that 90% or better of the inventory that my offices have listed since June the 1st is either under agreement or already sold at X list to sale price ratio? So clearly, the program that we have in place to attract qualified buyers to well-priced inventory is working brilliantly. I'd rather focus our discussion on what it is you and I can do together to help you over the hump of being rejected by the market. We didn't get there quickly because he was a little stubborn, but we did get there, right? We did get there. But remember, guys, at some point, you've just got to wave your arms and say, okay, dude, what else do you want us to do? Now, that's not the best script. Dude, what else do you want us to do? Not the best script. I'd rather you go with my first version. But that's kind of the sentiment, right? There is nothing else to do. And what I find sometimes is that sometimes some of you answer that by saying, well, maybe I'll send my photographer back. I'll take a whole new round of pictures. Come on, guys. Do you really think a new round of pictures is what the problem is? No.
Yes.
It's yes, says the photographer. You keep quiet down there. Right? It's not the pictures. It's not the pictures. Another conversation I had with somebody last week was, you can tell I've been on the phone with a lot of sellers, right? Another conversation I had was the idea that I said, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, would it surprise you to know that there are a lot of really terrible real estate agents who sell a whole ton of property? And she said, really? And I said, yeah, that's kind of my answer too. Every time I see the numbers, I said, why did I ask you that question? Why is that important? And she said, well, probably because I was just complaining that my property didn't look good online. And I from what you're saying to me, I imagine you're going to say that there are a whole lot of properties that look a whole lot worse than mine. I said, look, this is not me being defensive about photos. It's simply to say that there are a lot of properties that have no photos or terrible photos versus the professional photos that you had taken that have already sold. And so at the end of the day, do we think that's the reason? Right? Sometimes you have to just help them walk through the steps of, there's only one thing left. Right? There's only one thing left. All right, can I show you my, how we're pulling some of these stats? Debbie, are you seeing the MLS? Yes? Okay. So, the stats that I believe you need to have ready at the go every single time are as follows. Number one, month supply of inventory. Now, most of you know how to calculate month supply of inventory. I am going to show you quickly for those who don't. It's very simple, right? Month supply of inventory is one of the main metrics you need to be using. I will tell you, in the last couple of weeks, maybe months, month supply of inventory has been slightly less relevant broken down by price point, simply because most of the month supply of inventory have been like under 2. So it's, you know, it's hard to say, oh, well, you really should be tucked right under 500 because, you know, over 500 is this big jump. So much of the inventory under $1 million has been flying off the shelves. And so price pointing inside month supply of inventory inside of price points has been slightly less relevant. I don't encourage you to get rid of it, however, because it won't stay that way forever. And there are still some anomalies in terms of price pointing that you can uncover when you do that. So let me show you quickly how to do it. You click on single family, and we'll just use Brookfield for now, right? The first thing you want to know is you want to know how many of those homes sold in the last 90 days. The answer here is 84. 84 homes in the last 90 days. You then take that answer, 84, and you divide it by 3, right? Because 90 days represents 3 months. People oftentimes ask, why don't you just say 0 minus 30? Well, you need 3 months of data, and then you need the average of that data to make sure that you're not hitting an anomaly in 1 month, right? So you go back 90 days and then divide by 3 to get a per month number. When you divide 84 by 3, you get 28 homes per month that are sold single family in Brookfield. Guys, that's the absorption rate. Some of you are curious about the term absorption rate. 28 homes per month are being absorbed into the Brookfield market. Now, to get month supply of inventory, you just have to do one further step. If you come back here to status and click off of closed and on to active, you then get at the bottom 25 current homes on the market. 25 current homes on the market. You divide that by the rate of absorption. The rate of absorption was 28 homes a month are selling, right? So 25 divided by 28 is less than 1, 0.9, right? There's like 10 and a half months, excuse me. There's like, as if you did it by days, like there's like 27 days. That's the absorption. I mean, that's the month's supply of inventory. Less than 1, 0.9. That is a massive, massive seller's market, right? That's the entire town of Brookfield. Now you would do that in order to have a conversation with your seller. You do the whole town, and then you do price points that make sense in the town that the property is listed in. Some towns 0 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, 8, over 8 makes sense. Some towns 0 to 500, 5 to 750, 750 to a million, million to $1.5 million, and $1.5 million over. You need to understand your town, the town the house is listed in, and what the parameters are to run those numbers. However, right now, what's crazy is in Brookfield, you have 0.9 months supply of inventory. Do you think that's important for a seller to understand?
So Ridgefield always lags the market. Right now, Ridgefield has 1 month of inventory. So are you
Yeah.
kidding me?
Yeah. Well, so, but here's a real thing. Silva, I just saw your hand. I'll be ready in a second. Here's what I want you to recognize. Oftentimes people think that piece of that data point is not useful when you're having a conversation with sellers about their price, right? As a matter of fact, there's nothing more useful. How is it useful for people? Agents think that when there's a month or less supply of inventory, that sellers can just price wherever they want and throw caution to the wind. What is this data point actually underlined for them?
That they are overpriced.
Well, it could underline for them, if they've been on the market and haven't sold, right? That they're the only property that now hasn't sold. It could also help them recognize that you don't want to be the only property not experiencing the benefits of this kind of a market, right? That's the turnaround script on that. So Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what does less than a month's supply of inventory say to you about the positioning of your property? The answer isn't we can do whatever we want. Because if you get that, that's an interesting thought. I'm curious, do you think there may be another interpretation of that data point that we should be cautious about? If you're looking at it from using that as a sign of caution, how could that be a sign of caution in terms of how you position the property? See how everything's a question, right? You've got to continue to get better and better at flipping things into questions. I almost just fell for it myself and told them something. How could we look at that as a sign of caution and then help them come to that realization? Wow, yeah, we actually have to be pretty precise because we don't want to be the only property not benefiting from these conditions. Silva.
Thank you, Rick. So I'm warning you, you're not going to like what I'm going to say.
I like everything you say.
I know, thank you. I usually include also the show and the deposit in the equation when I calculate the market absorption rate, and I put them with the same number as sold.
Yeah, and so I'm pretty certain, and Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty certain you include show and deposit, but you include it in the actives.
No. Show and deposit in the same category as sold.
Yeah, I know. That's what you're saying. I think Debbie uses it somehow differently.
Yeah, I
You're
know
muted,
that Debbie is using it differently, and I know that you're suggesting that you don't even use it. So that's why I brought it up, because I would like some clarity around it.
Debbie, you're muted.
I did do a separate calculation to show the velocity of the market, because at that point, it was a question of, are there 10% of the homes going under agreement every month? 20%? It never got over 30%. And now it's 50 to 75%. So it's almost irrelevant.
Agreed.
There's a question that is being asked though from sellers if they haven't sold. I'll tell you, this is a seller objection right now. I'm going to wait till the spring. And the question that you ask back is, do you think that you're going to have a better competitive advantage when more people come on the market, or now when there is so little inventory and there are still buyers out there? And depending on their motivation, take advantage of this moment.
Because what do we know from the scenario that Debbie just put out there? What we know is they're saying, I'm going to take it off and wait till the spring or not put it on, thinking that they're just kicking the same problem, that they're kicking the can down the road, right? Let's deal with it today when there's an advantage versus you deciding to deal with it later when there's less of an advantage, right? So Silva, I'll come back to your question. I do not use show and deposit. Agree, and that is true. And I don't use them because they, in my opinion, they are neither closed nor active, because show and deposit do have an interesting way of not necessarily getting to a closing table. Sometimes they pop back on. Even if they will close, they'll be included in the month supply of inventory calculation over the course of the next 4 weeks when they actually themselves close. So to me, it's like you're looking into the future and bastardizing the numbers for today by stealing them from the future. So for me, it's closed and active. If you want to do a separate velocity conversation with show and deposit, that's fine. I leave them out because I'll tell you, my conversations with sellers have not missed the shows and the deposits.
No, the calculation, and there is a formula that includes it, but that calculation is called your odds of selling. And right now it's almost an irrelevant conversation because your odds of selling are almost 100%.
Right. Yeah. And unless you've made a really bad decision, right?
You've chosen to be the negative 10%.
Yeah,
the
that
10%
outlier.
that are not selling. I mean, that's your choice.
Let me give you one other thing, because I know we're just about out of time. I want to make sure that one of the things that you understand how to do is look at year-over-year data, right? So let me show you that real quick. Year-over-year pricing. Here's what you would do. You would click on closed. You would run it from 1/1/2019 to what's today? 11/5/6 something. We'll do yesterday. 11/5/2019, right? So you're going to run all the closeds in Brookfield single family for last year through today, right? Last year through today, last year. So you're using the same time period.
You put 2020 or 2019?
So I think I put 2019. Yes. So the first thing I want to do is see what it was last year, right? So I'm going to run 19 first, and then I click on results. And then when I get those results at the bottom here, I'm going to click on stats and tabular. And you get the box, right? Those of you who've been to class before, you know I like this little box. I use median because it takes out any anomalies. And so the median sale price last year in Brookfield for the first 10 months was $400,000. Everyone sees where I get that? Right here. $400,000. Now I'm going to go back and compare that to what it is this year. So I'm going to go back to my criteria, and now I'm going to change this to 1/1/2020 to 11/5/2020. So I'm comparing the exact same time period year over year, right? That's where we get the year over year number. Hit results, click stats at the bottom, click tabular, you get your box. Same time period this year, 425.5, right? 425.5 minus 400 gives you 25,500, and then you divide the difference by where you started. So 25.5 divided by 400,000 is a 6.4% increase. year over year, 6.4%. See how that's done? It's really very simple, right? You need the median from one spot, the median from what you're comparing it to, subtract the two. Now, clearly, if when you subtract, right, the answer is negative, well, then you're going to get a negative answer, and so then it's a drop. If when you subtract, you get a positive answer, well, you can see the number went up. It went from 400 to 425, so it's up by 6.4%. Does that help? Now, just in order to save time, I want you to also take a look at, remember I said before, one of the things that I found useful. Now, Debbie made an interesting point. In the last couple of weeks, some of these conversations are kind of a moot point because the market has been moving so swiftly, there's very little difference, right? But one of the things that I would encourage you to do is figure out what the short-term pricing conversations look like. What was the median sale price 90 days ago, right? So 90 days ago was October, September, August. It was August 5th, right? So if I put in here August 5th, 2020 through September 5th, 2020, whoops, and then run that, I get a median of 425. Now, if I go back to my criteria and I change the criteria to be 9.5 to 10.5, and then I run it, and then I pull my box, it went from 425 to 494, right? That's that next month. And now what was the third? Now, again, individually, each of these months doesn't necessarily tell you the story that you need to, that will help the seller. And yet I think the seller deserves to know, let's figure out what it was in the last 30 days. Did it crest? So now we're going to say, okay, now we're going to say 10.5 through yesterday. So now that's the last 30 days, right? Results, stats, tabular. Kept going up, 508, 750. Now, that's not to say that you have this massive price. You can't say from 400 to 495 in a 30-day period, prices jumped that much, right? That's not the point of this exercise. The point, though, is to be able to for you to know the numbers and to be able to say, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, one of the things we've noticed tracking the trending in the last 90 days in terms of properties that are closing is that pricing continues to increase. Now, the increase from 90 days ago to 60 days ago was much steeper than what we've seen between 60 days ago and 30 days ago. So we may be starting to see a slowdown in the increase in pricing. That may also be indicative of a slight turnaround where prices are going to level off or start to come back down, right? So my point, guys, is that you don't necessarily need to give them each of these numbers, because sometimes the numbers make it seem like you can just list it however you wanted to. But I think trending like that is important minimally for you to know. You then get to decide how you use it. But the curve in pricing in Brookfield is like this. However, it was really steep and now it's starting to flatten out, right? So that may be indicating something else. Do you see how you're starting to help interpret the market for them by getting real clarity around what may be driving it? Here's the last time that I want to, the last point I want to make before we end. The last point I want to make is don't be afraid to say, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that's a great question. Not sure that there's an answer for it. Some of you are terrified of not knowing the answer. And here's what I can tell you. Sometimes sellers ask questions that there isn't an answer to. I was asked recently, why do agents speak negatively about some condo complexes versus other condo complexes? And I said, that's a great question. I said, for that, I would need an entirely different degree, right? Which I don't hold. And yet, if what you're saying, this person had heard that agents in Stamford spoke negatively about her condo complex, not our agents per se, but we were having a conversation around why her property hadn't sold when the neighbor came on and sold immediately. I said, well, great question. What was the main difference between you and your neighbor? Well, they came on $30,000 lower. I'm curious. I wonder if that's a strategy you should look into. What do you think? Well, I'm not going to give my property away. I said, I'm curious, are you familiar with what happened next door? She said, well, I know it sold very quickly, and I think with multiple offers. I said, yes, that's correct. Do you know what typically happens with multiple offers? Well, are you referring to the fact that maybe it went over asking? I said, I am. Now, her neighbor's house happened to be sold by one of our agents, so I knew exactly how much over asking it went for, which of course I could not share with her. And yet, I had the data, I knew the info. I said, so I'm curious, Mrs. Seller, does it make better sense for us to spend our time focused on things that we can't control, like people talking negatively about your condo complex, or spend time on things that we can control, which is the positioning of your property? Don't be afraid to simply objectively say, great question. That I don't know. I don't know. And I'm curious, is it as relevant a conversation as some other aspects of your property that we maybe should be addressing? Somebody also recently said to me, my property's been on since November and hasn't sold. And I said, well, would it be okay if what we did was focus on the last 3 or 4 months? Well, no, I want to know why it hasn't sold since last November. I said, well, I appreciate that. Unfortunately, we've been through about 3 different versions of the market since then, including a worldwide pandemic and a national shutdown. And so with all due respect, do you see how maybe talking about why the property didn't sell last December is not quite as relevant as what's occurred in the last 90 days and what we can do to change it moving forward? Oh, well, yeah, I guess I see your point. Good, because I'm not talking about last December, right? Nor am I talking about last March or even May. We can talk about July through today. That's what we'll talk about. Let's focus on what really matters. And mostly we want to focus on tomorrow. Don't be afraid to take a stand on behalf of their success. That's how I'm going to leave you today. Some of you come from the perspective of, when Rick says things, he sometimes sounds mean. And I will tell you that is never how sellers hear me. They don't always like the things that I say, and I know which ones those are going to be. And so I preface it by saying, do I have your permission to be direct? Do I have your permission to tell you the things that I think you need to hear about the market versus what you want to hear about the market? I'm curious, do I have your permission to take a stand for your real estate success? And when they answer yes, then we just have a flat out conversation, right? Guys, I trust that you will take away from today that you are in a far better position if you are willing to go out on a limb and tell people truly, and I shouldn't say tell, because it really is all about asking. Ask people the questions that they need to be asked to really get to the root and the heart of the matter, instead of the dancing around that we do. Right? The job is simpler than we sometimes make it. There are facts that need to be laid out and decisions made upon them. People have a right to make bad decisions. Silva Christoph. People have a right to make bad decisions. And we sometimes need to support their right to make bad decisions. You can't fix and save everybody. What we can do is objectively continue to bring information to the table and help people see what we hope they want to see. Guys, I hope this was helpful today. I think somebody asked, I think it was Diane, if I will send this out. I will do that. I'll send it out before I leave today. Just remember that it's just an example, and it was just a simple retelling of a conversation that I had, but use it as a structure, use it and kind of give yourself an outline to start having these conversations within. Have a great afternoon, have a lovely weekend. And I personally will either see the Ignite students at 4 o'clock, or I will see all the rest of you Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Have fun. See you soon.
Thank you.